A photograph, particularly one taken at a funeral, is never a mere reflection of external reality. It becomes a mirror that reveals the depths of the human unconscious, capturing what the eye sees, but the mind dares not name. In 1902, when the solemn art of funerary photography was both a ritual of remembrance and a social statement, each image carried the weight of unspoken emotions. The photograph preserves the living and the dead together, but it also traps something else: the unseen tension that binds them, the emotional residue of secrets, guilt, and longing that hovers between them. A funeral photograph is not only a token of mourning, it is a psychological document of repression. The living pose to honor the dead, but behind every composed face lies a web of thoughts that defy their surface expressions. The camera, in its mechanical neutrality, becomes an unknowing witness to the shadow of the soul. It does not distinguish between the innocent and the guilty, between grief and deceit. It records everything: every tremor in the hand, every flicker in the eyes, every hesitation of the body. In the photograph taken during that distant funeral of 1902, there stands a figure among the mourners whose calm blends perfectly with the rest. The murderer, invisible to all but history, becomes part of a composition that was meant to celebrate reverence and remembrance. The result is a paradox, an image that both conceals and reveals. The murderer's presence transforms the photograph into a mirror of the unconscious. What appears as unity, the family, the community, the solemn ritual, is fractured by an invisible divide. On one side stands the conscious desire for order, morality, and mourning. On the other stands the unacknowledged truth, the shadow that everyone feels but no one can see. This interplay between appearance and reality, between the light of ceremony and the darkness of human impulse, gives the photograph its haunting power. Every photograph captures more than its subjects intend to give. The lens freezes not only gestures but emotions, and even those emotions that are suppressed find ways to express themselves. The photograph becomes a form of psychic X-ray, revealing what lies beneath the performance of mourning. In the stillness of the scene, one can imagine the slight stiffness of a posture, the faint turning away of the eyes, or the nervous tightening of fingers, tiny betrayals of a secret conscience. The murderer is not only hidden among them, but reflected in them all, for the photograph holds a truth greater than one person's guilt. It holds the collective burden of repression. Every mourner, consciously or unconsciously, carries their own shadows: regrets for words unspoken, anger at the deceased, fears of mortality, or silent envy toward the living. The murderer's presence merely sharpens the focus of that darkness, reminding us that evil is not an external force, but a potential within every human heart. The funeral photograph, then, becomes both a memorial and a confession. It captures a society's attempt to impose order on chaos, to sanctify death with ritual, while denying the raw forces that death exposes. The mourners pose to project unity, but the photograph remembers the fracture. In the grain of the image lies the psychic truth that no ceremony can erase, the truth that light always creates shadow. Each face, though calm, is illuminated by an awareness that something unspeakable lingers beneath the surface. The murderer's secret merges with the collective unconscious of the group, making the photograph a timeless portrait of human duality. Even a century later, when one looks at the image, the sensation persists, that something within it is alive, unfinished, unresolved. The photograph holds the silence of the grave, yet within that silence, one hears the pulse of the unseen. It is as if the image itself dreams, replaying the eternal tension between what we show and what we hide. In this way, the funeral photograph of 1902 transcends its historical moment. It becomes a mirror held up not only to those who stood before the camera, but to everyone who dares to look upon it. In every human being exists a hidden territory that resists the light, a realm where our most forbidden thoughts and impulses dwell quietly, unseen but not inactive. This is the inner landscape that no mirror can reveal and no confession can fully describe, the space where the boundary between good and evil begins to blur. The murderer hidden in the funeral photograph is not only a person who has taken a life, but a living symbol of this secret inner world. To the mourners standing around the coffin, The murderer is just another grieving figure, a shadow among shadows. Yet, within that stillness, their presence transforms the entire image into a psychological riddle. The photograph captures more than a crime concealed. It reveals the eternal truth that within every soul lies a shadow capable of cruelty, envy, deceit, or destruction. This figure, blending seamlessly into the crowd, becomes a representation of the darkness that each person hides beneath the surface of civility. They stand as the embodiment of the silent war within every human heart, the conflict between what we appear to be and what we fear we truly are. When we look at this image from 1902, what chills us is not simply the presence of a murderer, but the recognition that such a presence could pass unnoticed among the innocent. It forces us to question the fragile boundary between morality and instinct, between law and desire. The hidden murderer becomes an archetype of the human condition, the shadow that every individual tries to deny, repress, or project onto others. The murder itself, though invisible in the photograph, has already occurred. Its echo lingers in the air, shaping the emotions of those who stand unaware. The ritual of mourning, meant to cleanse and consecrate, becomes the perfect disguise for guilt. No one suspects the truth because the truth dwells too close to them. To recognize it would mean to acknowledge their own potential for darkness. The murderer, in this sense, becomes both a physical presence and a psychological metaphor, a vessel carrying the collective shadow of all humanity. Their existence challenges the illusion that evil can be isolated or named, reminding us instead that it flows like a current through every human life, surfacing in different forms and moments. The photograph, though silent, becomes a confession written in light and shadow. The murderer's calm face is indistinguishable from the others, and yet, somewhere in the details, the posture, the gaze, the faint unease of the body, there exists a whisper of truth. The murderer is not just one among them, they are all of them. Their guilt belongs to everyone who has ever felt hatred but remained silent, who has ever desired harm but disguised it beneath virtue. This is the psychological truth that radiates from the image. The hidden murderer represents the denied half of the self, the unacknowledged shadow that modern life forces us to bury beneath layers of propriety and order. The more society insists on its innocence, the more powerful and dangerous that shadow becomes. The crowd in the photograph gathers to mourn the dead, yet symbolically they also mourn their own lost wholeness, the purity that can never exist once one becomes aware of the darkness within. The murderer, though unseen, becomes the key that unlocks this recognition. There is also an eerie harmony in the fact that the murderer stands among mourners without fear. Their calmness is not only deceit, but a strange acceptance, as though they embody the part of humanity that refuses to pretend. They have acted out what others suppress, becoming the vessel for the collective darkness that society disowns. This act, horrific though it may be, holds an unsettling kind of honesty. The murderer carries the truth of what lies within everyone else, though expressed in the most destructive form. The funeral, meant to restore moral order, instead becomes a gathering of contradictions. Life and death, guilt and innocence, truth and concealment standing side by side. The photograph freezes this tension forever. Looking at it, one senses that time itself has been arrested not only for the deceased, but for everyone in the frame. Through this figure, the photograph becomes an eternal psychological mirror. It whispers that morality is never absolute, that light cannot exist without shadow. The murderer's invisibility is not the result of cunning alone, but of the world's collective refusal to see what it does not wish to see. We build our lives upon boundaries, between right and wrong, good and evil. But in this photograph, those boundaries dissolve. Every gaze in the image, every motionless figure, becomes a reflection of the same dual nature. The hidden murderer, therefore, is not an intruder but a revelation. They do not simply haunt the picture, they complete it, giving visible form to the truth that each of us carries within, a truth that is both terrifying and profoundly human. A funeral is never just a ceremony for the dead. It is an unconscious ritual for the living, a carefully constructed bridge between loss and denial. Beneath the hymns, prayers, and gestures of sorrow, there exists a hidden dialogue between truth and repression. The funeral captured in that 1902 photograph holds more than grief. It holds concealment, an unspoken agreement among the mourners to maintain the illusion of order while standing on the edge of chaos. They gather around the coffin to mourn the body, yet within their hearts, each person is also bearing something unseen, a thought, a fear, a secret. In that moment, the photograph becomes not merely a record of death, but a psychological landscape where repression and revelation coexist. The ritual of mourning provides structure to pain, but it also provides a hiding place for guilt. The living stand before the dead and perform their grief, but the camera, indifferent and mechanical, sees through performance. It captures what the human mind tries to forget, the slight hesitations in movement, the glances that do not meet, the stiffness of bodies holding more than sorrow. The ritual meant to purify becomes the perfect disguise for corruption. In the photograph, time stands still, but tension does not. The mourners' black garments merge into a sea of uniformity, and yet within that sameness lies a fracture, an invisible wound. The ritual of the funeral has a dual purpose: to express grief and to contain it, to give shape to emotion while suppressing what threatens to overflow. It is a controlled storm. The tears shed are permitted, but only in proper measure. The silence is heavy, but it is rehearsed. And within this carefully measured sorrow stands a person whose heart holds a secret darker than death itself. The murderer's presence distorts the energy of the scene, though no one perceives it consciously. The ritual continues as if untouched, but the photograph captures a spiritual dissonance, a quiet disharmony vibrating beneath the gestures of reverence. What was meant to be an image of mourning becomes instead a document of repression, a visual map of human denial. The funeral, as a ceremony, attempts to create distance between the living and death, but this image collapses that distance, binding the mourners to the corpse in ways they cannot understand. The murderer's hidden guilt seeps invisibly into the atmosphere, uniting everyone present in a shared but unspoken complicity. The photograph, as it freezes this moment, transforms the funeral from a ritual of closure into one of exposure. The stillness becomes unbearable because it is too perfect, too composed, as though everyone in the frame is trying to hold back a truth that is threatening to erupt. The air in the image feels heavy, not only with grief, but with secrecy. The faces of the mourners, softened by sorrow, take on an ambiguous expression, neither fully sad nor fully serene, but somewhere in between, a liminal state where the conscious and unconscious blur. The murderer hidden among them is not the only one performing. Everyone in that photograph is performing something: grief, virtue, solidarity, control. Yet within these performances lie cracks that the photograph cannot help but reveal. The ritual allows each person to suppress their inner chaos under the guise of unity, but the act of being photographed immortalizes their suppression. The camera, unaware of social codes, captures what the eye avoids. It traps every shadow, every contradiction, every tremor of unease. The image, intended as a token of remembrance, becomes instead an X-ray of the collective psyche, a frozen confession in which everyone plays a part. There is a strange irony in how ritual can both conceal and reveal. The more sacred the act, the deeper the denial it protects. In this funeral scene, the very structure meant to heal the community becomes the space where the hidden truth gains power. The murderer stands in the midst of solemnity, but their secret merges with the rhythm of the ceremony itself. Their guilt is woven into the chants, the folded hands, the bowed heads. The others, unaware of the deception, participate in a collective cleansing that cannot succeed because the impurity remains among them. The photograph becomes a paradoxical altar, sacred yet profane, holy yet haunted. It traps a moment when the boundaries between life and death, purity and guilt, mourning and deceit collapse into one another. Every ritual gesture, every breath becomes part of the drama of repression. The funeral is no longer about the one who has died, but about those who live. How they conceal, how they justify, how they carry on without acknowledging what lurks beneath the surface. The camera, without judgment, preserves their secret forever. Looking at the photograph now, the viewer does not simply see a funeral from the past. They see the timeless human struggle to hide the unholy within the holy, to silence the truth with ritual, to perform innocence while standing beside the face of guilt. In every photograph, the eyes are the most revealing feature, the only part of the image that refuses complete silence. They are the mirrors through which the unconscious betrays itself. And in a funeral photograph, their language becomes almost unbearable in its quiet intensity. In the 1902 image, every mourner's gaze seems to carry a weight beyond grief, a heaviness that feels like knowledge, like guilt, like fear. Some look away from the lens as if to avoid being seen, while others stare directly into it with an unsettling steadiness. It is through these eyes that the photograph becomes more than an artifact of mourning. It becomes a psychological confession. The eyes are not simply organs of sight, but portals through which the inner life leaks into the outer world. They reflect the things we suppress, the truths we cannot utter, the impulses we pretend not to have. When one studies the image long enough, it becomes clear that among those many faces, one pair of eyes holds a different kind of light, something not born of sorrow, but of secret memory. The hidden murderer's gaze, though indistinguishable to the casual observer, radiates an unconscious vibration that unsettles the entire composition. The gaze of the murderer in the funeral photograph does not scream or confess. It whispers in silence. It is not what the eyes show, but what they try to hide, that gives them power. The murderer stands among the mourners, face composed, eyes dimmed like the others. Yet beneath that calm lies a quiet flicker of awareness, a recognition that they, unlike everyone else, know the true story behind the coffin. In the stillness of the image, their eyes become a paradox. They belong to the crowd, yet they exist apart from it. The photograph, in capturing that moment, turns their silence into a statement. It records the collision between guilt and disguise, between knowledge and denial. The murderer's gaze represents the timeless truth that no mask is perfect. Even the most controlled expression reveals traces of the hidden self. In contrast to the murderer's quiet dissonance, the eyes of the others tell their own complex stories. Some look toward the coffin with reverence, some avoid looking at it entirely, and some glance at the camera with that strange mixture of curiosity and discomfort familiar to early photography. Each gaze holds an inner narrative that the photograph traps forever. There are those who look directly at the lens, and in doing so, they seem to address the future, the unseen observer who will one day study this image. Their eyes pierce through time, unaware that what they reveal is not only mourning, but complicity. Even in innocence, there is a trace of shared darkness. The eyes, when studied collectively, form a pattern, a web of unconscious communication. They reflect not only individual emotion, but a shared psychic tension, as if everyone in the photograph, without knowing it, feels the invisible disturbance among them. The murderer's presence infuses the scene with an unseen energy, and the eyes of the others respond to it on some instinctive level. The photograph becomes a silent conversation between gazes, between the guilty and the innocent, the conscious and the repressed, the self and the shadow. The longer one studies the image, the more the gazes begin to shift in meaning. At first, they appear sorrowful, then anxious, then strangely vacant, as if each face is a mask worn too long. The eyes of the mourners and the murderer together create an atmosphere that is neither purely grief nor purely guilt, but something suspended between. The photograph turns into an emotional labyrinth, each gaze a doorway to a hidden corner of the human psyche. What fascinates and unsettles the viewer is that no gaze is neutral. Every set of eyes, whether lowered or lifted, is charged with the energy of something unsaid. The murderer's gaze, in particular, becomes a mirror for the viewer's own consciousness. As we look into the photograph, we feel as though the photograph is looking back at us, asking silently, "How different are you from the one you seek to identify?" This exchange between the seen and the seer blurs all moral boundaries. The gaze of the murderer merges with the gaze of the observer, creating a haunting recognition that the potential for deception and guilt lives within us all. Through this complex interplay of eyes and glances, the funeral photograph ceases to be an image of mourning and becomes a meditation on perception itself. The eyes, though still and lifeless in the image, seem to carry movement within them, the restless motion of the human soul attempting to hide from itself. The photograph immortalizes this motion, turning the act of looking into an act of revelation. Each gaze is a fragment of a larger psychological truth, that we are always seen, not only by others but by the deeper self we cannot escape. The murderer's gaze is only the most visible manifestation of what the others unconsciously share. The funeral photograph then becomes a theater of eyes, an unending performance of concealment and exposure, of shame and recognition, of souls caught between darkness and light. Beyond the visible frame of the photograph lies something more powerful than the crime itself, the quiet weight of collective guilt. The 1902 funeral photograph, at first glance, appears to show a community united in mourning, but beneath the stillness of that unity lies an invisible tension, a shared psychological burden that transcends any one individual. The presence of the hidden murderer becomes a mirror that reflects the darkness embedded in the group's collective soul. The mourners may not consciously know what has transpired, yet the photograph captures a vibration that speaks to an unspoken truth, that guilt is not confined to the hands that commit the act, but ripples outward, touching everyone who lives within the same moral fabric. The image becomes less about one person's sin and more about the entire community's silent participation in it. Every face, every gesture, every shadow becomes part of a larger confession, one that no voice dares to articulate, but which the photograph, with its merciless eye, records forever. The hidden murderer, though central to the mystery, is not an isolated figure of evil. They are, rather, the condensation of the community's repressed instincts, a vessel through which the unconscious violence, envy, and fear of all the others find temporary expression. Society maintains its sense of purity by projecting its darkness outward, by identifying one person as the transgressor, so that the rest may remain clean. But in doing so, it denies the deeper truth, that within every human being lies the same capacity for cruelty. The photograph, by including the murderer among the mourners, disrupts this illusion. It blurs the boundary between the innocent and the guilty, revealing that morality itself is often a collective performance. The mourners appear righteous because they do not yet know, but their unawareness is also a form of complicity. Their grief, sincere though it may be, is interwoven with denial, and that denial is what the photograph immortalizes. The murderer's secret infects the image, turning it into a visual metaphor for the human condition, a society built upon repression, silence, and selective blindness. In that era, the early 20th century, photography was seen as a tool of truth, a means of preserving memory and documenting reality. But this photograph defies that expectation. Instead of revealing truth, it exposes the layers of concealment that truth hides beneath. The collective guilt is visible not through direct evidence, but through atmosphere. The expressions of the mourners are too still, too perfect, their grief almost theatrical in its restraint. They embody a culture that values appearances over authenticity, a world that mourns publicly but sins privately. The murderer's inclusion in the frame transforms the photograph into an unconscious self-portrait of that culture. It captures not only the death of a person, but the death of innocence, the quiet realization that evil is not an external force to be fought, but an internal shadow to be understood. The photograph thus becomes an archetype of denial, a relic that documents the human tendency to distance oneself from guilt by displacing it onto another. When we study the photograph today, the sense of collective guilt emerges not from any single detail, but from the atmosphere that hangs over it like fog. It is in the way the light falls unevenly, the way some faces seem to fade into shadow while others remain starkly illuminated. It is in the posture of the mourners, standing too rigidly, their hands folded too carefully, as if trying to suppress something restless within. The murderer's presence magnifies the tension but also reveals the hypocrisy of moral order itself. The community grieves one death while unknowingly harboring the cause of it, and in doing so, they enact a deeper drama, the eternal human tendency to judge without self-examination. The photograph traps them in this paradox, making their collective guilt visible not as an accusation, but as an atmosphere, a vibration that can be felt across time. The power of the image lies in its refusal to assign blame clearly. The murderer is there, but so are the silent witnesses, the indifferent, the naive, the self-righteous. Together they form a circle of shared responsibility. The photograph's stillness does not absolve them, it binds them. Every person in the frame becomes part of the story, part of the spiritual consequence of the act. This is the haunting genius of the image. It makes guilt democratic, no longer belonging to one, but to all. The photograph stands as an unspoken acknowledgement that human beings are not divided into victims and perpetrators, but are threads in the same moral fabric, woven from the same flawed materials of fear, desire, and denial. The hidden murderer merely embodies what the others repress. Their act, though monstrous, is also revealing. It brings into focus the darkness that society works tirelessly to forget. In this way, the funeral photograph ceases to be a record of one crime. It becomes a testament to the universal truth that every community, no matter how upright it appears, carries within it the same shadow it condemns. The true power of the 1902 funeral photograph lies not in what it presents to the eye, but in what it conceals within its stillness. Beneath the fixed expressions, the solemn postures, and the monochrome tones, there exists an invisible pulse, a secret rhythm that only the unconscious can hear. This image, taken in the name of remembrance, becomes a container for everything that the living dared not say. The murderer, hidden among the mourners, becomes the key to this hidden dimension, transforming the photograph from a mere record of grief into a symbolic revelation of the unseen. Every photograph captures light, yet it is the shadows within the light that give it meaning. What is unseen within this image is not simply a person concealed by circumstance, but the entire undercurrent of human truth that society strives to keep buried. The photograph is a mirror turned toward the soul, one that reflects not the visible face, but the invisible conscience. It holds within its silence the residue of emotions too dangerous to name: fear, guilt, envy, and the strange comfort found in denial. The unseen truth within the photograph speaks not through visible gestures, but through atmosphere. It hovers between the mourners like an unspoken word, binding them in a shared silence. The camera, indifferent yet all-seeing, has captured not just the faces of the living and the dead, but the invisible architecture of deceit that surrounds them. The murderer's presence does not distort the image but completes it, giving it its hidden charge, its haunting vitality. Without that unseen darkness, the photograph would be lifeless, a mere imitation of sorrow. With it, the image breathes. It vibrates with the tension between what is revealed and what is repressed. The unseen becomes the soul of the photograph, and that is why it continues to disturb even after more than a century. It invites us to look closer, to sense what is missing, to feel the truth that hides between the folds of clothing, in the glimmer of the eyes, in the faint blur of a hand. The unseen truth is not simply about a murderer hidden in plain sight. It is about the human condition itself, the way we carry secrets beneath our rituals, the way we hide guilt beneath love. This unseen reality transforms the photograph into something more than a historical artifact. It becomes a psychic landscape, a kind of dream that does not belong to the individuals in it, but to humanity as a whole. The scene of mourning becomes a symbol of the eternal struggle between concealment and revelation. Each mourner, unknowingly, plays a role in maintaining the illusion of purity, while the photograph, cold, objective, and timeless, betrays that illusion with quiet precision. The murderer's secret is the key that unlocks this larger paradox, that truth, when hidden, does not disappear but grows stronger in the dark. The photograph reveals this by refusing to show it directly. The more one looks, the less one sees, and the more one senses. It is this unseen presence that gives the image its haunting quality, that strange feeling that something in it is alive, watching, waiting. The unseen truth within it is not confined to the past. It extends its shadow into the present, reaching into the consciousness of the viewer, forcing them to question what they themselves might be concealing beneath the appearances they show to the world. The photograph, therefore, becomes a dialogue between the seen and the unseen, between time and eternity. Together they speak of the human tendency to hide behind order, to build beauty upon denial. The unseen murderer is not just an individual, they are the symbol of the hidden side of existence, the darkness that sustains the light. The more we try to erase such truths, the more persistently they return, encoded in images, in dreams, in symbols. The 1902 photograph stands as a quiet testament to this eternal law, that what is unseen governs what is visible, that every appearance rests upon a secret foundation. The photograph does not reveal the murderer because it does not need to. The truth has already revealed itself in the tension that fills the air, in the unnatural harmony of the composition, in the haunting equilibrium between stillness and unease.